Hello everybody, so here is Black Angel again and I'm here with a video about submission. So for the series that I started about sexual identity, I want to talk about submission. So what is submission and what does it mean to submit to someone? Now, in this video, I'm not going to address the topic of submission from a submissive point of view, but I'm going to address the topic of submission from a slave point of view. Now, first of all, for those of you who are considering finding a dominant or finding a master, and for those of you who are willing to be someone's slave, it is important to realize a couple of things. First of all, if you strive for being someone's slave, it must be because in some way you believe that that thing is going to make you happy. So this video is not addressed to those that are going to pick slavery because being punished makes them feel less guilty about something that they believe they should be guilty about, but it is addressed to healthy slaves. So with healthy slaves, I'm talking about those individuals that really find delight in being dominated. So what is submitting? What does it mean to submit to someone? The first and most important thing that you need to realize is that being a submissive personality doesn't necessarily mean that submission is going to come natural to you. That's not because you're a wrong person or because you don't know yourself or whatever the case may be, but it comes from society. So you have grown in an environment where in some way you have been taught to be competitive, to stand up for yourself, to stand your ground, and so on. So that you're successful in that or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is that teaching there is going to always speak to you from the back of your mind. So whenever a dominant, or your dominant of choice, we should say, is going to order you something, part of you is going to riot or rebel against that thing. That it is the voice tone, that it is the very fact of having to do what someone else says. Whatever the case may be, some part of you is going to have a difficult time carrying on what you actually want to carry on as an order and to comply to. So this is something that takes time to work on. And that's why a lot of dominants actually choose, a lot of masters actually choose to submit their submissive to a period of training. So there's this thing going on out there that some dominants claim that they can train a submissive or a slave, and they can train this person for someone else. No, it doesn't make any sense, because that means that you're assuming that they, or you are assuming that whatever master you're going to meet, they're going to have the same necessities and the same requirements. That's not how it works. Every single master, every single dominant has different needs, different requirements, and a different personality. So that's something important to keep into account, because striving for having something in your life doesn't mean to force it in your life. Anyway, this period of training that a lot of people talk about within the community is a very important time through which the submissive or the slave starts learning about the master. So you start learning and figuring out if he likes having breakfast taken to him, for example. If he likes you to speak your mind and tell him what you think, or if he prefers that you don't do that. That's very rare, actually. Masters are normally very strong personalities, and unless they are narcissistic and hence not very healthy, they normally do appreciate when their slave speaks their mind. They might have, or rather, they will likely have requirements about how you do that. Some masters, for example, appreciate a very upfront attitude. Some other masters instead do not appreciate an upfront attitude and want to hear the submissive keep the submissive position, so speak their mind with a more respectful tone. So this kind of master is not going to accept something like, I think that's a stupid idea. That's something that this kind of master is not going to accept. Whereas the other kind of master instead will likely accept it. There's gray areas in between, obviously, and not every master is the same, but this is just to give you a rough idea. You're going to start figuring out if the person likes salty foods or sugary foods, if they prefer their coffee black or not, and so on. A lot of little details. But the most important thing that training is going to take you through is your personal development as a slave. So your personal development as a slave also includes understanding your own needs and those things that you actually cannot give up to. So there's going to be a set of things that to you are vital. One example, a polyamorous slave is not going to be happy if she's going to live with a monogamous master that doesn't let her leave or him leave their polyamory life. And a monogamous slave instead, someone that needs an exclusive relationship, is never going to be happy with a polyamory master. And that's not a matter of jealousy or anything of that kind. It's simply how a person is made and what their requirements are. There's this thing going on out there of people saying that if you are a slave, you have to comply with master, having sex with whomever he or she may want. I don't agree with that. I personally completely disagree with that. It depends on the submissive, on the slave, and it depends on the master. So a submissive, a slave that feels not taken care of, not loved, and unhappy if her master has sex with other people, should probably find a master that is like-minded. So that has this similar points of view and that can understand, not that can understand the slave's position, but that embodies the slave's needs. This is extremely important because obviously you cannot change a master. So you're the slave. If you're the slave, you're not going to walk up to your master and tell your master, "Oh, I disagree with your behavior there, so you've got to change that." That's not how it works. It's more about you figuring yourself out before you actually enter the relationship. Obviously, if you enter a relationship with a master and through the relationship you figure out things that make you realize that no matter how you love this person, you cannot be their slave, you have a right and you have a responsibility both towards yourself and towards this person to step back and inform them about your feelings. Stepping back can mean getting out of the relationship and finding someone else. I don't wish that to you because it must be really awful. I never went through that. Lucky for me, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. That that's something that you need to keep into account. Also, another thing is, it is true that as a slave, you are supposed to be doing everything the master tells you. But what is important and absolutely necessary is that you figure out that you're not in the hand of an abusive individual. So a real master, even a real owner that cares about you, takes care of you, and really considers you a cherished property, or anyway something very important, is never going to ask you things that they know will make you hurt. So that's something that you need to keep into account. If you go out there and you check on BDSM communities everywhere, the first thing that is going to be brought to your attention is that you need to understand the difference between abuse and mastership. So abuse is not acceptable, and you need to be respectful of yourself enough not to allow anyone to abuse you. And this is why I said that this video is not addressed to those slaves that are instead desiring to be punished because it makes them feel less guilty about whatever it is that they believe they should be punished for. Because that's a form of abuse. And these people are seeking abuse. And as you can see, it's not something very healthy. So these people should instead, if they wanted to do something good for themselves, find the reason of their pain and solve their psychological issues before entering a relationship. Anyway, yeah, I think this is basically what is most important to keep into account, that being a slave requires long training, and it requires understanding your master's needs, understanding their rules, understanding their personality, understanding their requirements. But not only that, it also means understanding your requirements, understanding who you are, what you can give and what you cannot give. What you are good at, in what way you can be useful, and do your best to be the best submissive that you can be, the best slave that you can be. And you need also to keep into account that part of you is always going to fight against being ordered. Not always, only until you have gotten rid of all the teachings that come from the external world that have brought you to fight against your own personality and your own happiness. So I've seen a lot of people start doubting their submissive nature because they went like, I always thought I was submissive, but when he orders me around, I don't want it. I kind of feel like I should rebel, but at the same time I cannot rebel because some part of me wants it, but the other side of me doesn't want it. And that's because you have been taught that you should rebel. And it doesn't mean that you actually should. It only means that your upbringing, your education tells you to do something that actually makes you unhappy. So it takes the courage to look in the eyes of that thing and say, okay, you are not what I need. What I need is actually this. If instead that voice comes from within you, you probably need to take a very big step back and realize that you're not a submissive personality. Now, as far as my personal experience goes, it is more likely a matter of upbringing. So there's a lot we're taught that we should be doing, and even if it doesn't come natural to us, in every circumstance in which that specific thing happens, we start doubting ourselves that we should probably react the way we have been told bazillions of times we should. One personal example from my life. I like taking care of the person I love, and I kind of revolve around him like the moon, like the earth around the sun. And it shows very visibly externally that I do this thing. It shows so visibly that it's visible even when I'm not with my man. And I've been told bazillions of times that I shouldn't do that I should make him do stuff for me. And that's a doubt that used to jump in my mind very often in the past. That they probably were right, and that my relationships probably didn't work for that reason. And now instead that I've grown up, that I've worked a lot on myself, and that I've been through a very, very big path of personal growth, I realize that that thing is what makes me me, is one of those things that make me me, and it makes me happy. And the only thing I need is to have next to me the man that can appreciate and truly appreciate that kind of behavior. Not take advantage of it, appreciate. So that's very important, that you start realizing all these things that are going to ring in your head and make you feel like you should be different from what you are. That you shouldn't be submissive, that you should be something else. And trust me, that's a very big part of training. That it implies discipline or not, it is a very big part of training. And even though no master actually seeks a doormat, it is also true that no master wants to excessively fight to have what they want. So imagine this. Imagine that time that you truly wanted to do something and you were denied that thing for someone else's whims. That's the feeling that is going through a dominance and a master's mind every time that you start fighting without any reason to fight, just because you've been ordered to do something. For example, the master is working on his computer and he says, hey sweetie, take me, or hey little one, take me a glass of water, I'm thirsty. That shouldn't even be a problem. Like, you shouldn't even wait for him to ask you. You should know that now and then this guy is going to need something to drink, and you should have a table ready for him next to him with a glass of water and a bottle, with a glass and a bottle of water, or anyway, make sure that it is always filled, so that he doesn't need to actually ask you. But in case he's okay with asking you and he asks you, if you feel inside of yourself, oh my God, I was doing this thing, he's making me stop whatever it is that I was doing, and he wants me to do that, and now I feel disappointed because, oh my God, I wanted to finish this thing, and so on. That's your old self that is telling you that you shouldn't obey orders. So that's when you need to stop and you need to ask yourself, do I want to obey this guy or do I not? And that's going to be a big part, if not the main part, of your training as a slave. That's basically the main thing that your mind needs to learn. It's not about learning details. If you think about it, think about your father or your mother or your sister. You're perfectly aware of what they prefer, and you would be perfectly able to anticipate their needs. That's not the problem. That comes with time. Every master is perfectly aware that it takes time to you to actually learn everything about them and to actually become acquainted and and to know well everything that they need, to the point of anticipating them. There are some things that are going to be more natural to you and some things that are going to be less natural. But every master knows it takes time to learn those things. But the important thing is that whenever you are told something, you need to learn to obey. And that's not an easy thing to do. Even though you are a submissive person and you know you are a submissive person, you will find yourself a lot of times asking yourself if you truly want to obey. And that's a very important question to ask yourself, and you should ask yourself that question. Because every time you're going to find out that you actually want to. And every time you figure out that you actually want to, you're going to grow stronger in your desire to submit. And that feeling of rebellion is going to fade and become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the point of disappearing. The final parts of training, the final moments of trainings are probably going to be the most difficult. The final parts of the initial training, are probably going to be the most difficult, because at that point, this is something that I consider a very big struggle. At some point, you're going to be in such a state of mind that you are silencing that voice. So you're so used and so sure that you actually want to submit, and you don't need to ask yourself if you truly want to, that this struggle with that inner voice, so that tells you that you shouldn't, is going to become more of a silenced thing than something you're aware of. So every time that voice says, oh, you should rebel, you're going to say, no, you're going to fucking shut up, because I don't want to rebel, and I actually want to comply. But the voice is still there. That you hear it or not, that you silence it or not, it's going to be there. And seeing it, facing it, and overcoming it is going to be extremely difficult, and it will require a lot of help from your master. So this is another thing to keep into account. You have to always be 100% sure with your master. Do not bug him excessively, but don't be afraid to tell him what your feelings are, what your problems are, what you're struggling with, and what you need and require help with. Obviously, your master is going to tell you in what way to do that, but it is extremely important that you are open to him or to her, master or mistress, obviously, that you're very open to them, and that you tell them things exactly as you know them to be. This is what it means to do your best, to do your best. Obviously, sometimes you might be wrong about yourself. If you strongly believe something is some way that it isn't, you're not lying. You are delivering what you see and what you believe. And if it turns out it's different, then you're going to learn it yourself and to fix the problem the way it needs to be fixed. So don't worry about lying when you say something that you think is one way, and then you figure out it actually was another way, because that's not a lie. That's you telling your master you're seeing things that way, and therefore you require his help to either fix it or know what the truth is. So that's very important to keep into account. I've heard of some masters that give their slaves specific times in which they can express their feelings. Some others appreciate letters written to them, and some others want the slave to keep a diary where they write everything they feel, so that sometimes the master can go and read and know exactly how the slave is feeling about things. One friend I used to have, for example, told me she had her diary on her computer, that her master had the password for her computer, and now and then he went on the computer, went through the pages of her diary, and they would discuss together what she had written in the diary. And to do that, you obviously need to feel very open towards this person, and it needs to feel like you're looking forward for him to read it. That's the good feeling that you should have. If you feel like you don't want to see that, then there's some problem that you need to solve. It can be that you are not trusting him enough, or her enough, obviously. It can be that this person is doing something that makes you take a distance, and in that case, you need to figure it out yourself. But if you know for sure that this person is trustworthy, and you do trust them, you shouldn't have problems with them reading inside of you and knowing everything that goes through your mind. Even if it's something that makes you feel ashamed, you're going to tell them exactly what it is. So you're not running for a political campaign. We're actually trying to live a healthy and fulfilling relationship with someone we love and that loves us. So, and this is why I'm talking about slaves specifically, because this slave-master relationship kind of implies also romantic side of the coin. Even if it's not specifically romantic, what I mean, there's love involved. Whereas submissive and dominant isn't necessarily a relationship. So there is obviously a play relationship, but it doesn't need to be a romantic kind of relationship. So there doesn't have to be love involved. There's also some categories of slaves, as far as I've seen, that are not necessarily loved, but I think it's very close to what I was mentioning before of people that need to be punished and so on. Anyway, yeah, I think I will close this video here. I wanted to explore this side of the coin a little bit because I think it's something that it's not said enough online. So I will close this here and I will talk to you soon. Bye.